Hey everybody, so the other day I did a video where I talked about the main reasons that Donald Trump won the election and won the popular vote, which were gains among key demographics of voters that typically support Democrats. But today I want to go into the reasons of why what Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party did to lose this year's election. So, reason number one, I think, is the fault of Joe Biden. So, Joe Biden takes office, and I think at the time he was so interested in getting the macroeconomic numbers up again, that he did not take into account the inflation that could be caused by some pieces of legislation that were passed in his first year in office. And it has been stated in studies that things like the American Rescue Plan and the infrastructure bill did lead to increased inflation. They did help the macroeconomic numbers, but what they didn't help is grocery prices and gas prices and things like that voters tend to care about more. And then that's the next issue that we're talking about. The Democratic Party, up until very late in the election season, we're talking about how great the economy was when the economy was not when the public perception of the economy was not doing well. You see, the macroeconomic numbers like GDP growth and unemployment rate were looking great. And if voters had voted on that, Kamala Harris would have won. But voters did not vote on that. They voted on how expensive groceries were, how expensive the rent was, and how expensive gas prices were. So yeah, the lack of focus on the cost of living crisis and more of a focus on the unnecessary woke ideology and talking about how great the economy was. And yeah, other issues, the woke ideology that an extreme left ideology that Kamala Harris is tied to. You see, there was actually videos of her. It was used in attack ads by Trump, where she says that she wants to taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries for prisoners. And for any kind of undecided, moderate voter, moderate Republican, independent, that's something that turns you off. The fact that you want to spend their taxpayer money on transgender surgeries, something which most of the population would oppose. And also, all of her other positions, like decriminalizing illegal immigration, making it legal to cross the border without proper documentation, something like that turns these people in the middle, not on the left or right, it turns them off. Maybe shifts them towards Donald Trump. The issue of immigration and border security was not addressed adequately at all by the Democratic Party. Yeah. So the ghost of Kamala Harris past is one of the things that really killed that campaign. Taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries, banning fracking, decriminalizing crossing the border. Yeah. It's just devastating because these guys, they wanted to prevent Donald Trump, and then their messaging against Donald Trump was, oh, he's a fascist. The Democratic Party, Joe Biden won in 2020. He portrayed himself as a uniter, not a divider. They need to portray Donald Trump as the divider. And then they're coming out here, they're calling Donald Trump a fascist. They're comparing him to Hitler. That's very divisive and confrontational language. It's not promoting unity. That's promoting hate and division, which the Democratic Party is supposedly against. And then we get onto the issue of wars. So during the Iraq War, not too long ago, the Democratic Party was the people who opposed the Iraq War. 2008, Barack Obama, he ran as an anti-war candidate and won because the public was so upset about the Iraq War. But then we have the wars going on in Ukraine and Israel, and the Biden administration sent $700 billion in military aid to foreign countries. And the Trump campaign was able to send a message to taxpayers that Biden and Harris are sending all hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer funds to fight the forever wars in foreign countries, instead of spending it on investment into America. Yeah, that's a very effective messaging. And then Donald Trump ended up winning the Arab Americans' support. And that's why he won the state of Michigan. So, yeah, and they're very mad because Donald Trump was the one who committed to reducing military aid and bringing peace to the Middle East. He talked about how he's a candidate of peace. He has people like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, very anti-war people, supporting him. RFK Jr. likes to talk about how the Democratic Party has become the party of war, the party of neocons. As an example, Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, John Bolton supporting Kamala Harris, and one of their major things was foreign policy. And neocons are probably the most dead political breed in America. Neocons who have this hawkish interventionist foreign policy, which is very unpopular right now. Most people are in favor of an isolationist foreign policy. And these wars in Gaza and the war in Ukraine that the United States government is spending hundreds of billions of dollars fueling is very unpopular with the American public. So that's the final issue. So main issues is the ghost of Kamala Harris passed, the failure to address the cost of living crisis, and then failure to address the cost of living crisis, and the failure to have a more reasonable position on foreign policy matters, and instead of adopting a neoconservative foreign policy, which they ended up doing. So those are all the reasons that the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris lost this election. The main reason that Donald Trump was able to win over voters on the most important issue was the economy. He promised tons of working class, middle class Americans no tax on tips, no tax on overtime pay. That had a huge influence. And Americans do remember that he cut taxes. Things were cheaper back when he was president. That's why he won. I don't think it had anything to do with racism and sexism, or abortion. Abortion did not end up being a major issue. People voted for Donald Trump because they thought that he was the guy who was going to make things more affordable. They thought he was the guy who was going to cut taxes, and they thought he was the guy who was going to solve the cost of living crisis and make people's personal economic situations better. So that's why Donald Trump won, Kamala Harris lost. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe.